I transmigrated into a novel. The good news is, I became the rich heir of a powerful family. The bad news, I'm actually the real young master who was switched at birth, hated by everyone. Worse still, the story is about to end. According to the original plot, the fake young master is about to inherit the family business, and my girlfriend, Willow, the moment she hears the Wang family abandoned me, immediately dumps me and runs off with the fake heir. The subtext of what she says is clear: she wants to be Mrs. Wang. As for who Mr. Wang is, that doesn't matter. Meanwhile, I'm kicked out of the house, homeless and wandering, fighting stray dogs for scraps in the trash. Such a tragic storyline leaves me with zero will to live. I look up at the bright blue sky, my expression peaceful and calm, ready to give up and follow the path of the original protagonist. As I seriously debated whether dying in a car crash or jumping off a building would be more dignified, a group of passing robbers dragged me into their van. One of them pulled out a knife and pressed it to my throat, grinning wickedly as he said, "Don't move. This is a robbery. Call your family and get them to send 5 million for your ransom. If you dare scream for help, I'll send you straight to hell." Looks like the heavens do have a plan after all. I smiled in relief and nodded, then opened my mouth and shouted at the top of my lungs, "Help!" Chapter 01. The scream was sharp enough to tear through eardrums, leaving the two robbers stunned on the spot. One of them quickly slapped a hand over my mouth to muffle me, growling viciously, "Wanna die now or what?" I shook my head hard, eyes gleaming with anticipation as I struggled to mumble, "Really? I don't believe you. Go ahead. Prove it." To my disappointment, the robber had no intention of doing so. Instead, he pulled my phone out of my pocket, unlocked it by scanning my ready-to-die face, then slid his thumb to call the most recent contact, Alicia. After an agonizing wait, just before the call was about to disconnect, it finally connected. Before the robber could say a word, Alicia's shrill voice exploded in the cramped van like a banshee on steroids. "George, can you stop clinging to me like a damn piece of tape? How many times do I have to tell you, I will never acknowledge you as my brother in this life?" That last line was shouted with such righteousness it echoed. The robber blinked, clearly caught off guard by her aggressive energy, but staying professional, he snarled into the phone, "We've got your brother. If you don't cough up 5 million, we'll kill him." Alicia scoffed, her voice rising another octave. "George, is this your brilliant new scam? Faking your own kidnapping to get money? Huh? I'm telling you, cut the crap. It's so fake. Besides setting up shady traps for Makoto, what else can you do? You want to kill him? Go ahead. We're not paying a single cent." From the other end, the fake young master, Makoto, spoke gently. "Sis, maybe he's just doing this to get attention. Let's just check on him. If he gets desperate and does something reckless, it might get serious." Alicia lowered her voice and said, "Makoto, you're just too kind. Someone like him, a cowardly leech who only thinks about how to suck more money out of the Wang family. You really think someone like that got kidnapped? This is just a bad script he wrote and starred in himself." Then the call cut off abruptly. Silence fell in the van. After a long pause, one of the robbers turned to the other and asked, "Didn't they say George was the real heir of the Wang family? Why does it seem like the family prefers that imposter instead?" They both turned to look at me, scanning me from head to toe. I stared back solemnly, then reminded them to show some basic respect for their own profession. I said, "What are you staring at? Hurry up and kill me. There's only 30 minutes until sunset. If you wait too long, are you planning to spend $20 feeding me dinner too?" Chapter 02. As long as they kill me, I can finally be free of this, hated by everyone, identity. I do feel a little sorry for the original protagonist who's now missing, but honestly, I have no desire to keep struggling in this world. Before I transmigrated, I was just a 9 to 5 corporate drone. No parents, no family, no friends, no brothers. All I had was a life of lonely, repetitive commutes between work and home, and a growing sense of exhaustion and confusion about the future, until one day, while crossing the street, a car ran a red light and slammed into me. At that moment, I felt an uncanny calmness inside, as if a faint beam of light pierced the darkness and led me out of my suffocating life, giving my heart, long drowned in seawater, a moment of relief. Who would have thought, when I opened my eyes again, I'd landed in an even harder mode of hell. At the same time, a book appeared in my mind, standing quietly like a monument. It told me I had become a universally hated character in a novel, a real heir switched at birth by a nanny. After enduring 18 miserable years in an orphanage, he finally found his biological parents. But sadly, just like in real-life cases, his parents had already formed deep emotional bonds with the adoptive son. They barely knew their real child. The initial joy of reunion faded quickly in the face of complicated feelings. Their guilt toward their biological son came from the pain he had endured, but to send away the adopted son to make up for it meant they'd have to be the ones making that decision. So, Like most wealthy families, they didn't send the adopted child away. They just decided to treat both boys as their own. But the real young master who had vanished for 18 years could never match up to the fake one who had grown up with elite education and etiquette. A swan living among crows long enough will have its feathers tainted black, filth that can never be washed clean. Meanwhile, the crow living among swans, cultivated by their love and training day after day, eventually opens pure white wings and blends into the flock. Labeled crude and unpresentable, the real young master, deemed worthless, was kicked out and left to roam the streets. Everyone turned away from him and gathered around the impeccably dressed, graceful fake young master, singing endless praises. At the end of the book, there was only a single, dismissive line. George, who tried so hard to gain everyone's attention, was finally thrown out by the Wangs. Penniless, he wandered the streets and eventually died at the hands of the kidnappers who never got the ransom. After reading that, I turned my hopeful gaze toward the two robbers in front of me. After I requested to be killed, the van once again fell into a weird silence. The two buzzcut men huddled together, whispering for a long time, and then made a decision completely different from the original plot. They weren't going to kill me. They were going to rob a jewelry store first, to make some fast cash. The younger one hesitated. Big bro, I thought we agreed to just extort ransom. Now we're straight up robbing a store. I don't know how to do that. The older one smacked him on the head, furious. Isn't it all about making money? What's the difference? We'll just use this guy as a hostage. Grab the gold, then run. Still worried, the younger one asked. What if we can't get away? The older one replied confidently. No worries. I checked, detention centers in the capital have better meals than anywhere else. I swear, you'll eat oily dishes 3 times a day. Besides, I flew across the country to bring you here. It'd be a waste if you didn't try. The younger one nodded, touched. Then he turned to me and, seeing my, I've given up on life, expression, threatened. Just behave later. Got it? If you cooperate and act like a good hostage, we'll let you go afterward. I asked. Can you grant me a small wish? He replied. Say it. I had no interest in following any extra plot lines. By the end of the book, there wasn't a single word about me anymore. With a sincere heart, I said earnestly, since I'll be working so hard as your hostage, after the robbery, can you do me a favor and stab me to death? The robbers were speechless. Chapter 03. The jewelry store robbery went surprisingly smoothly. The two robbers worked in perfect sync. One smashed at the glass with a sledgehammer, while the other was tugging and struggling with me. Still gripping his knife, he yelled. That's my knife. Let go. I replied sincerely. Bro, you just need to swipe it across my neck. Quick and easy, it won't take much of your time. He cursed. Get lost. Robbery and murder ain't the same thing. You can't fool me into stepping on the sewing machine for longer inside. Meanwhile, a crowd had already formed outside, chatting and pointing like they were at a festival. One person said, wow, such a primitive robbery method. Another commented, see that shatterproof glass? Not easy to break. Look how exhausted the guy is, been smashing for ages and still hasn't broken a single panel. And someone else added, welcome to the stream, babies. Today we're live streaming a jewelry heist. Smash that follow button. Big thanks to our top supporter, Alicia, for the Heart Bunny gift. To answer your question, we're broadcasting live from the corner of South Alley Street. Besides me, there was another girl still inside the store who hadn't escaped in time. Dressed head to toe in expensive designer brands, she was clearly used to a pampered life. Now, she squatted on the floor, trembling, eyes full of fear and a hint of admiration, watching me wrestle over the knife with the robber. Her eyes shimmered with unshed tears. As the sound of police sirens drew nearer, the robber who had failed to break even one piece of glass finally snapped in frustration. He pulled out a switchblade from his pocket and swept the room with a vicious glare. Then, like a madman, he lunged and grabbed the squatting girl, shouting with murderous rage, if I'm going to prison, I'm taking someone with me. The flash of the spring-loaded blade drained all color from the girl's face, while I, on the other hand, was practically elated. The moment I'd been waiting for had finally arrived, late, but not missing. If I died fast enough, I could even save money on dinner tonight. Goodbye, original body. If I run into the original protagonist on the road to the underworld, maybe we can catch up. The switchblade was raised high. In the chorus of screams, I lunged forward, throwing myself in front of the girl like a true martyr. Screams rang out all around. I felt the cold steel pierce into my abdomen. Warm, sticky blood began to flow out slowly. The blood loss made my head spin, just like when I was hit by that car in the original world. That same eerie sense of calm washed over me. Everything in the world lost its color. The view before my eyes cracked into 1,000 razor-sharp shards. I closed my eyes, a peaceful smile on my lips. Letting out a long sigh, I whispered, finally. I'm dying. My body slowly went limp. To the sound of the girl's tearful screams, I slipped into unconsciousness. Right before I fully lost consciousness, I thought I saw a woman anxiously pushing through the crowd, stumbling to my side with panic written all over her face. She shouted in terror. "Why are you all just standing there? Call 911, now." Chapter 04. From the way her features resemble mine by about 50%, I figure this must be Alicia, the character described in the book, the original protagonist's biological older sister. But Alicia would never look at me with worry in her eyes. According to the novel, ever since the original protagonist returned to the Wang family, the person who hated him the most was her. On the very day he was brought back into the Wang household, Makoto, the fake heir who had lived under their roof for 18 years, stormed out that same night. When the family finally found him after searching all night, Makoto was drunk out of his mind, disheveled like a stray dog. With a trembling voice, he choked out, "Mom, Dad, Sis. I thought you didn't want me anymore." Alicia clung to him, heart aching, then turned her furious gaze toward the original protagonist and shouted, "This is all your fault. You hillbilly, don't think that just because you share blood with our parents you get to bully Makoto. Let me tell you, blood ties can never compete with 18 years of shared memories." Back then, the original protagonist stood awkwardly in the lavish Wang family living room, wearing a cheap t-shirt and worn-out shoes. His only belongings were in a shabby bundle at his feet. The central AC made his body hair stand on end, yet not one person even looked at him properly. Someone like that, who didn't fit into the upper-class world at all, was bound to be disliked. No surprise everyone silently resented his sudden reappearance, breaking the long-standing peace of the Wang household. From that day forward, the original protagonist began a year-long journey of groveling and trying to win back the family's affection. But all he got in return were looks of contempt and cruel nicknames. Loser. Embarrassment. Dead weight. In the end, he was accused of bullying and framing Makoto. The Wangs kicked him out with nothing, no home, no family, no support. Now it's me who's inherited this tragic fate. Sorry, but this dull, colorless path. The original protagonist may have walked it. But I won't stay here even a minute longer. Chapter 05. The strong stench of antiseptic filled my nose. I forced my eyes open, and turning my head, I saw Alicia's face, her brows slightly creased in concern. All this over-treatment. I just wanted to die. And somehow they made it look like I was fighting to live. I finally ran into some robbers, yet the knife missed every vital organ. Only a minor flesh wound. If I want to pull off a fake death and vanish act, I'll have to try again. In the original plot, George dies at the hands of the robbers when the ransom never comes. But something must have gone wrong. I was captured by the same kind of criminals. Yet here I am, completely fine. Did I not cooperate enough? Was my desire to die not obvious enough? This unexpected vitality was deeply irritating. Alicia's voice made it worse, harsh and grating as she snapped. "George, if you didn't keep doing attention-seeking crap with zero dignity, maybe we wouldn't have just stood by while you nearly died." I cut her off coldly. "Shut up." The original George tried so hard to please them. "I won't." Lying on the too-soft hospital bed, something was digging uncomfortably into my neck. I reached up and tugged. Turns out, it was some kind of worn-out charm for peace and safety. Its cloth was faded, threadbare. The deep red silk had long lost its luster. Something hard was tucked inside. I didn't inherit the original George's memories, but this ragged little thing felt annoying and useless. So I ripped it off and casually tossed it away. It flew through the air in a perfect arc. Alicia's words suddenly died in her throat. The moment she saw me throw away the charm, her eyes locked onto my face, unblinking. Her voice trembled as she asked, "George, did you really just throw that peace charm away?" Chapter 06. I asked, "What else would I do?" I looked up, genuinely confused. It was poking me and uncomfortable. Why wouldn't I throw it away? I've already suffered enough. Dragged inexplicably into this strange world, made into some universally hated problem child. And now I don't even have the right to toss out a crappy peace charm. I don't even want to keep living. Why would I care about a faded little charm? Alicia's voice rose sharply with frustration. "George, do you seriously not remember where that peace charm came from?" I lazily lifted my eyelids and replied calmly, "No, I don't." A thick book stands like a monolith in my mind. I've got zero patience to comb through it in detail. All I've done is skim the plot and get a rough understanding of this world and the misfortunes that befell the original George. As for that peace charm, if it was ever mentioned, it was a passing footnote. It didn't leave the slightest impression on me. Alicia looked visibly pissed, her face flushing red with emotion. She stood up and stared hard at my indifferent expression, clearly trying to find even a flicker of guilt or pretense in my face. But my utter calm told her all she needed to know. I really didn't remember, she snapped, kicking the charm aside and scoffing. "Wow, George, you've really stepped up your acting. Let me guess, those robbers. Hired actors, right? All just part of another pathetic stunt to get our attention and crawl your way back into the Wang family. She sneered again. Honestly, it's a good thing we kept Makoto 18 years ago instead of a born troublemaker like you. No matter how sharp Alicia's words were, they failed to stir anything in me. I had no plans of staying in this world anyway. I ignored her entirely and scanned the room. The hospital ward was on the 18th floor. A lucky number. Supposedly, the window opened wide enough. Easily enough space for me to slip through. Sorry, doctors and nurses. I'm about to waste your hard work and precious time. Outside, the evening sky burned red with scattered clouds. If I'm going to die, no need to wait for an ideal day. No better moment than now. I pressed a hand to my wound and slowly dragged myself to the window. Alicia, still standing there, rolled her eyes, watching me hobble forward. She laughed bitterly. Oh, keep it up, keep acting. What now, planning your next scheme? You really will stop at nothing for the Wang family's money, huh? George. Her sarcasm was cut short, collapsing into a gasp of sheer terror, reflected in her wide, panicked eyes. I took a deep breath. My expression softened. I closed my eyes, and in one swift motion, I climbed through the window and threw myself into the sky. Chapter 07. The light, drifting sensation of falling suddenly stopped short. A sharp pain shot through my arm, muscles pulling tight. I opened my eyes in frustration and looked up. Alicia's face was flushed red with strain. She was gripping my arm tightly, panic and terror written all over her expression. Her eyes were reddened, her voice hoarse as she screamed for help. I, on the other hand, said flatly, "Let go." Her fingers clenched even tighter. Her voice trembled, obviously breaking, as she said, "George, I won't. It was my fault before. Just please don't do anything rash. Okay, I swear I'll pull you back up." With the help of the doctors and nurses who had rushed in, they finally dragged me back in from the window and into the hospital room. My arm, nearly pulled out of its socket, throbbed in pain. The moment I hit the ground, I fell in a tangled heap, completely disheveled. Alicia clung to me, trembling uncontrollably in the aftermath. Her eyes welled up with tears. She shouted in near hysteria, "Are you out of your mind? This is the 18th floor. If I hadn't grabbed you in time, you would have ended up a pile of blood and broken bones." Then, as if something suddenly occurred to her, the color drained from her lips. She stared at my calm, detached expression. Her voice shook as she whispered, "George, I thought you were just acting again, just another stunt to get our attention. But you really wanted to die." The realization made her voice trail off into incoherent panic. I stared at her, confused. Alicia had hated the original George for as long as he'd been in the Wang family. If I were really dead, wouldn't that make her happy? Why did she look so full of regret? Before I could process any of it, the strain from everything caught up to me. My still healing wound tore open again. Blood seeped out slowly, blooming red like plum blossoms on my gown. The world around me blurred. My eyes rolled back. And then, I completely blacked out. Chapter 08. When I woke up again, I was in the Wang family's villa. A spacious, bright bedroom, but not the one the original George used to stay in. Though I didn't inherit his memories, I'd seen it described in the original plot. The room he lived in was no bigger than a walk-in closet, about the same size as Makoto's dressing room, originally meant for the household staff. After the real young master returned, unwelcomed by all, that tiny, cramped room became his so-called home. Not a trace of late-bloomed familial affection ever appeared. All he got were looks of disgust and disdain. When the lights of the day dimmed and night fell, I could clearly hear the argument coming from the living room. Alicia's voice rang out, emotional. "George really doesn't want to live anymore. He almost died in front of me, twice, today." Then came Mr. Wang's stern voice, full of authority. "George may be my biological son, but from the moment I first laid eyes on him, I could see all the bad traits carved into his bones. Kid's already been corrupted. Why else would he come knocking on our door? Of course it's for our money," he scoffed. "All this talk about suicide, it's just him trying to make a scene, get media attention, and pressure us into handing over cash." To be fair, Mr. Wang wasn't wrong about one thing. It was the original George who sought out the Wang family. He'd caught a glimpse of his biological father's face on TV, and the resemblance was so uncanny, like they were stamped from the same mold, that the orphan boy, now 18, decided to take a shot and see if fate was real. And as for the money, come on, the kid was still in high school. Without money, how was he supposed to survive? The Wangs had lived their whole lives in wealth, chauffeurs at the door, luxury cars for every trip, hundreds of thousands in dividends deposited monthly, more reliable than meals for a malnourished orphan. Even Alicia and Makoto received 50,000 yuan a month just as allowance. Designer clothes, accessories, Everything they bought was paid with Mr. Wang's black card, but the original George? Even 1 yuan for the bus, he had to earn it himself. On his first day at the Wang estate, he opened his mouth and asked Mr. Wang for 10,000 yuan. It wasn't for anything extravagant, just to pay his tuition and cover basic living expenses for half a semester. What he got instead was a wave of ridicule. Mr. Wang said, "Can't even pretend for 1 day. Huh? Already begging for money the moment you step through the door." In the end, he threw the money at George from above like tossing scraps to a beggar, and still found time to add, "You reek of desperation and greed. Honestly, that nanny swapping you out 18 years ago might have been the best thing that ever happened to this family." Now imagine how painful that must have been to hear, for the original George, but thankfully, I'm not him. In the living room, Alicia pressed her lips into a hard line. The corners of her eyes were red. She shouted, "Dad, George wasn't faking it. That was the 18th floor. If the doctors had come just a second later, he would have ended up as nothing but a smear of blood on the pavement." She paused, voice cracking. No one throws themselves off an 18th floor window unless they're carrying a world of pain. Even now, her hands still trembled slightly. Just remembering that gut-wrenching moment had left her pale as a ghost. Shock spread across the faces in the room. The Wangs, who had always worn disgust and annoyance like armor, were now frozen with disbelief. I quietly pushed open the door. The timing couldn't have been worse, but I cleared my throat and asked awkwardly, "Sorry to interrupt, but may I leave now?" Chapter 09. Everyone looked even more shocked. After all, they were used to seeing me, the old George, constantly groveling, trying desperately to please the Wang family, only to screw it up again and again. Now, seeing me suddenly so indifferent, wanting nothing from them, they didn't quite know how to react. But I wasn't the original George. I had zero emotional expectations from these people. Silence filled the living room. Makoto, who had been sitting beside Mr. Wang, narrowed his eyes slightly. Then, as if struck by grief, he put on a sorrowful face and said, "This is Big Brother's home. Of course he should stay. I'm the one who should leave. The engagement with the Liu family, that should be his as well." His words were laced with subtle manipulation, hitting the parents right where it hurt. They immediately snapped out of their daze, and the momentary hesitation on their faces froze back into ice. Mrs. Wang closed her eyes in feigned heartache, then looked at me with visible disgust and said, "I know what you're thinking. You're not just trying to push Makoto out to steal the inheritance. You're even eyeing your own brother's fiancée. Ever since you forced your way back into this family, you've been scheming nonstop to frame your brother, doing everything you can to kick him out. We used to have a peaceful home, until you showed up and ruined everything." I tuned her out completely, my heart as still as water. I didn't even glance at these people, just walked past them toward the door. But Alicia suddenly grabbed my wrist from behind. Tears welled in her eyes as she looked at me and said, "George, I don't believe what they say. I don't believe you're like that. I believe in you." I didn't need her belief. All I knew was, staying here would only delay my plan to disappear. But Alicia went as far as to call the bodyguards to block my way. In the end, under Makoto's hateful stare, I was forced to stay at the Wang estate, all because they were scared I'd try something again. Chapter 10. Now that I was back in the Wang home, my treatment was slightly better than the original George's. I was moved from a servant's room on the first floor to a guest bedroom on the second floor, but it didn't take long for the whole family to realize something was off about me. Back when the original George lived here, he did a ton of chores, hunting in the hills, fishing in rivers, digging up every flower in the garden just to plant wild vegetables so he could cook for them. And what did they give him in return? Insults. They mocked him for being uncultured, saying he was born to do farm work. So naturally, I didn't bother with any of that pointless effort. Once I moved in, I went full lie-flat mode and didn't lift a finger. The next morning, I slept until the sun was high in the sky. My stomach wound barely hurt anymore. When I finally came downstairs, I heard Mrs. Wang's disapproving voice from the living room. "Sleeping in this late, where's your sense of discipline?" Makoto, ever the gentle white lotus, covered his mouth and said softly, "Mom, George got hurt yesterday." Mrs. Wang scoffed. "Who believes that? That wound is probably fake." "George, go to the kitchen and make me some breakfast." Years of drinking and entertaining in business had wrecked Mrs. Wang's stomach, so she was extremely picky about food. In the original story, George personally cooked for her every day, delicate, nourishing meals made just the way she liked. Complicated, tiring, and thankless. My eyes swept over her with cold indifference. I said flatly, "Mrs. Wang, I'm not here applying for a job as your chef. If you want me to cook, you'll need to pay me market rate." Makoto jumped in to defend her. "Big brother, how can you talk to mom like that?" I looked at the smug, self-righteous glint in his eyes and replied evenly, "She's your mom, not mine." Chapter 11. Mrs. Wang stood frozen in place. What truly shocked her wasn't that I refused to cook. It was the fact that I no longer called her Mom. Even when the original George was getting kicked out of the Wang family over Makoto, he still called her Mom with hopeful sincerity. Now, those once yearning cries of Mom had been replaced by a cold, emotionless Mrs. Wang. I went to the dining room alone and casually grabbed some cold toast and milk from the table, stuffing it into my mouth. Corporate life had trained me well. I didn't fuss over food. The goal of eating was purely survival. Makoto, seeing that I no longer clung to Mrs. Wang like before, immediately seized the moment to play his usual performance. He came over to me, eyes filled with artificial guilt, and said, "Big brother, I know you've always liked Miss Lu, but we're getting engaged in a couple of days. Let's not let something small like this ruin our brotherly bond." He stared into my eyes, practically begging for a reaction, waiting for me to flare up, accuse him of stealing what was mine, so he could pretend to take the high road and offer a fake, magnanimous concession, and make himself look even more virtuous in front of Mrs. Wang, so that she'd be even more convinced. I was beyond saving, but after hearing him out, my eyes lit up, not with anger, but calculation. Now that I was living under the Wang roof, Alicia had turned into something like a 24/7 security camera, watching my every move. Terrified I'd try to kill myself again. Even staying an extra minute in the bathroom would have her banging on the door like a SWAT raid. But on the day Makoto and Miss Lu got engaged, with a mansion full of guests and all eyes elsewhere, wouldn't that be the perfect opportunity to leave this world? As for whether I liked Miss Lu, I let out a cold, dry laugh. My mind was a blank slate. I didn't even know what she looked like, so how the hell could I possibly like her? Chapter 12. The engagement between the Wang and Lu families had been planned over a decade ago. They were just waiting for Miss Lu to turn 18, and now, the union was finally official. The banquet hall was lavishly decorated for the occasion. Makoto, dressed in a sharp suit, sat at a gleaming grand piano in the center of the stage. A spotlight shone down on him, drawing every envious gaze in the room. His fingers danced across the keys, playing a piano piece with effortless elegance, fluid and flawless. I sat quietly in the far corner, and in that moment, I suddenly understood why the original George had been so unwilling to let go. Makoto had grown up pampered. His allowance was more than he could ever spend. His parents poured endless money and energy into shaping him, layer after layer of polish, until he became this dazzling figure, soaking in everyone's admiration. All of this should have belonged to the original George. The life he was meant to have was stolen and replaced with hunger, beatings, and fights in a cold orphanage. While Makoto received a 300,000 yuan motorcycle for his birthday, George was in the middle of a bloody brawl over a 50-cent candy. And even after managing to find his real family, his parents dismissed him as crude and unrefined. In a world where value was everything, he had none. Everyone hated him. Worst of all, the nanny who had switched the babies was long dead. Nothing remained but two boys living swapped lives, and no way to make it right. The song ended. Makoto walked over to me with a smile, straightening his collar. "Big brother," he asked, "how was my performance?" I swallowed a piece of roast meat, wiped my mouth, and said with a puzzled look, "It was fine. Sounded like you were fluffing cotton. If you've got nothing better to do, might as well chew on some lighters." Makoto could barely keep up his pretentious facade. He leaned closer, voice low and gritted between his teeth. "George, you came back too late. In this world, not even your biological parents will care about someone who brings nothing to the table. You understand that, right?" He wasn't wrong. To the Wangs, I was worth nothing. Whispers from the crowd floated into my ears, not even bothering to keep quiet around me. "That's the real Wang son, right?" "Yeah, totally rough and uncultured. I heard he grew up in an orphanage and asked for money the first day he came home. Raised outside for too long, already ruined. If I were the Wangs, I wouldn't claim someone like that either." Embarrassing. They weren't lying. The Wangs had never liked me. To a wealthy family, a child either expands the business or forges powerful alliances. If you can't do either, you're just dead weight. But the feeling was mutual. To me, the prestigious Wang family meant nothing. In this room full of people raising their champagne glasses, showering each other in fake praise, I quietly slipped out through the back door. I stood atop a tall rooftop. The wind was soft and gentle as it brushed past my face, and for the first time in a long while, I felt calm. The suffocating pressure in my chest lifted, just at the thought of leaving this strange world behind. Sure, my little jump would disrupt their perfect engagement party, but I doubted anyone would mind such a minor hiccup. If anything, they might even cheer, celebrating the departure of the universally hated black sheep. I opened my arms and took in the rich, sweet scent of roses. My lips curved into a perfect smile. I stepped forward, ready to climb the railing again and embrace the earth below. And just then, a terrified voice called out from behind me, George, don't do anything stupid. Chapter 13. I paused mid-step. Here she was again, like a ghost that just wouldn't go away. Alicia. Her eyes were bloodshot, and she crept toward me inch by inch, the worry on her face so intense it was practically blinding. Her voice choked as she pleaded. George, don't do anything reckless. It's dangerous up here. Please. Just come down. Okay. As she said this, she kept her eyes locked on my every move, afraid to startle me, yet desperate to pull me back. Like a wounded cat begging for mercy, I frowned, watching her carefully. Even from a distance, I could see her trembling beneath her elegant dress. For a split second, I almost felt it. That tension, that connection. Like real sibling affection. Like she genuinely cared. But wasn't Alicia supposed to hate me more than anyone? What's with this sudden role reversal? I took another step forward. Half my body now hung over the edge of the rooftop. Alicia panicked. Her voice broke into a shout. George, don't. It was my fault before. I admit it. Just come down. Please, whatever you want. I'll agree to it. She looked completely unhinged. Tears in her bloodshot eyes. The updo in her carefully styled hair was now unraveling. Strands flying wildly in the wind. But just then, a voice cut through the moment like a knife. A woman's voice. Cold, smug, and perfectly ill-timed. George, aren't you just disgusting? You'll do anything to ruin this engagement party. Huh? I turned toward the sound. It was Willow, dressed in a custom-made gown, standing there like a queen crashing someone else's funeral. She was the daughter of the Liu family, the very one the original George used to love. Back when I skimmed the original plot, I saw the part where, during George's early days in the Wang household, rejected by everyone, he met Willow. Rich, beautiful, gentle, she was a ray of light in his bleak, beaten-down world. And with the Wangs and Lius planning to merge through marriage, if that child swap had never happened, Willow would have been betrothed to him. For a boy raised in an orphanage, falling for a girl like her was understandable. She was his son, but the truth was painfully obvious. Willow wasn't marrying a person, she was marrying the Wang family. And Makoto, the polished, legitimate heir, was the obvious choice. What chance did George, who had nothing, ever stand? So the light that once shone on him quickly turned away, choosing someone else to illuminate. It was doomed from the start. A love story that never had a future. A brutal reality that left George bleeding alone. Willow looked at me with utter disgust. When she saw me swaying on the rooftop's edge, her voice dripped with contempt. Go ahead and jump, George. If you don't, you're not even a man. Even if you do die, I won't care. Cling to me all you want. My heart has always, and will always, belong to Makoto. Alicia's eyes snapped wide. Without warning, she slapped Willow hard across the face and shouted, Willow, who the hell gave you the right to talk about my brother like that? Willow stood there stunned, hand pressed to her cheek, completely thrown. She clearly couldn't understand why Alicia, who had always hated me, was now suddenly defending me. She turned her hateful gaze on me, then practically melted into Makoto's arms like a delicate damsel, twisting everything around and aiming all the blame at me. Sneering, she snapped, George, what are you scheming now? Did you say something to Alicia to turn her against us? Let me make this clear. Makoto isn't just my fiancé, he saved my life, and I will only ever love him. Chapter 14. The moment those words left Willow's mouth, a clear, firm female voice cut through the air. The one who saved you that day, wasn't it George? The rooftop erupted instantly. Murmurs and gasps spread like wildfire. Even the bright spotlights couldn't hide how pale Makoto's face had turned, white as snow. The voice belonged to Anna, the girl I had saved back at the jewelry store. Unlike the frightened, trembling girl I remembered from that day, Anna now stood with her back straight, no more fear in her eyes, only firm trust, and a deep, unwavering worry as she looked at me. Willow blinked in surprise, then quickly scoffed. Even from halfway across the rooftop, I could feel the thick disgust rolling off her. She sneered. Really, George? To get my attention, you're even trying to steal credit for saving my life? Makoto, holding her in his arms, clenched his jaw. Then, trying to muster righteous indignation, he looked at me and said, Big brother, I know you've always wanted to fit into the Wang family, and I know I've taken the place that was supposed to be yours for 18 years, but it's a well-known fact that I saved Willow 2 months ago. I know you like her. If you want the credit, I'll give it to you. His voice was loud, clear, and filled with practiced sincerity, the kind that sounded noble enough to fool an audience. Willow's eyes turned red with emotion. Even Alicia looked momentarily dazed, doubt flickering in her eyes. Anna, however, rolled her eyes. She calmly pulled out her phone from her small handbag, unlocked it, and tapped on a video, then turned the screen for everyone to see. On display was the wreckage of a car accident, twisted metal scattered across the road. Willow, covered in blood, Unconscious in the driver's seat, my figure, was struggling to pull her out from the wreck, then dialing emergency services with trembling fingers, though the streetlights in the suburbs were dim. Anna's phone camera had excellent resolution. My side profile was captured crystal clear. Even the faint scar on my ear was visible on screen. In the original book, this scene had only been mentioned briefly. Willow crashed into a highway divider outside the city. She'd hit her head and passed out. In a daze, she thought someone saved her. When she woke up, Makoto was by her bedside, so she naturally believed he was her savior. Fell even harder for him, and the engagement was moved up by months. Now Anna spoke again, defending me with visible anger. I may not be part of the Wang family, but even I've heard that George is the real son. He spent 18 years suffering outside, and when he finally came home a year ago, instead of being welcomed, he was treated like an outcast. He's only 19. What kind of despair must he have been in, to throw himself in front of a knife that day in the jewelry store, all just to protect me? Her voice trembled with emotion. The people around us began to murmur in disbelief and sympathy. On Anna's phone, the video played on loop, again and again. It showed my thin, malnourished body dragging Willow out of the crushed car, teeth clenched in pain, desperately moving her to a safe spot to avoid a gas explosion. Anna's gaze then turned to Makoto, whose face had gone ashen. Her tone turned icy cold as she added, "If I hadn't happened to be there, someone else might have successfully stolen credit for saving a life." Makoto's face was ghostly pale, his jaw clenched so tight it looked like it might crack, and in his eyes, that mask of false virtue finally cracked, revealing raw, bitter hatred underneath. Chapter 15. I cast a grateful glance at Anna. Even though I wasn't the original George, I wanted to thank her on his behalf. It was her, happening to be there, casually recording that video, who gave the original George the truth he'd been denied. If I ever run into him on the road to the afterlife, I'll make sure to tell him this good news. Willow instinctively pushed Makoto's arms off her. She stepped back, unsteady, eyes fixed on mine with disbelief. "George," she whispered. "So, the person who saved me that day was really you?" She began to inch closer to me, guilt and anguish all over her face. Her fingers trembled as she reached toward me, her voice shaking. "George, the rooftop's too dangerous. Please, come down. I swear I'll never misunderstand you again." Alicia quickly joined in, her voice tense with panic. "She's right, George. Come on, get down from there. It's not safe." Their concern didn't seem fake. For a moment, I genuinely wondered, did I accidentally steal the male lead script? But I wasn't in the mood to argue with either of them. I just wanted to log out of this storyline for good. The wind behind me howled like it was ready to take me away. In front of me, a sea of worried faces grew larger and larger. I couldn't wait any longer. I had no obligation to finish the rest of the hated by all plotline for the original protagonist. I could barely handle my own life. Why would I waste what little strength I had living someone else's? Heart hardening, I turned decisively and leapt over the edge, arms wide, body spinning in a clean triple flip, plummeting fast. Stars filled my eyes as the world blurred. Just before clearing the rooftop edge, I caught one last glance of Willow. Her expression, once filled with concern, instantly twisted into terror. She lunged toward me like she'd lost her mind, but only managed to grab the corner of my jacket. Screams erupted from behind as I slammed into the ground, but there was no pain. I wiggled my limbs. Everything was intact. Beneath me was something soft that shouldn't be right. This was the 5th floor, or higher. There should have been blood, broken bones, and probably death. Then, through the chaos, I heard Alicia's relieved voice ring out, "Thank God." I had someone set up an inflatable rescue mat down below. I was speechless. No wonder the fall didn't hurt at all. If the science show Mythbusters ever got hold of this case, they could probably make a whole 80-episode special just trying to explain how the hell I survived. I touched my heartbreakingly intact chest, let out a long sigh, and let my head fall sideways. This time, I actually passed out. Chapter 16. The scenery around me shifted. I felt as if I'd plunged into a surreal, dreamlike nightmare. In the dream, I was back again, wandering alone in the corner of a city. The neon world of nightlife, flashing signs and celebration. Always just out of reach through a curtain of fog. People passed me by without seeing me, one after another. I lived exactly as I had before I transmigrated, silent, unnoticed, commuting from one point to another. Each morning I opened my eyes, dull and dead, blending into the crowd alone, always alone. Suddenly, a car engine roared. It barreled toward me, tires screaming. I could have moved, but instead, for the first time in a while, I let out a long sigh, and chose to stay still. A harsh screech, brakes slamming. I opened my eyes again. I was back in the hospital. Not even a month in this world. And this was already my second hospital admission. When I came to, the room was full of people, all of them staring at me with worry. Only after seeing me awake did they begin to breathe again. Willow, her eyes red and swollen, clutched my hand tightly, as if terrified I'd vanish again. Choking back sobs, she said, "George, I'm so sorry. I misunderstood you. I was wrong. Please don't give up on yourself anymore. I know you've always loved me. I swear, once you recover, I'll marry you." I pulled my hand back warily and said, "Like you? When did I ever like you?" The one who liked her was the original George. If Willow turned into a pile of ashes right now, maybe she'd catch up with the real George, and they could have one of those unfinished love in the underworld kinds of tragic romances. But me, I'm just a wandering soul from another world. I have absolutely no interest in this woman, whom I've only met once. And to be honest, Willow's really nothing special. On the first day the original George returned to the Wang family, Willow had been radiant and charming, her eyes filled with subtle affection. Unlike those crude seductions that rely on cheap flirtation and physical bait, Willow's tactics were far more refined. She expertly read George's emotions, hooking him with thoughtful conversation, gentle cues, and well-timed sympathy. She quietly slipped into his heart without him even realizing it. He'd make a joke, she'd laugh softly, he'd mention something, she'd respond just right. She followed him like a sweet, admiring shadow, her eyes full of unspoken devotion. And always, she reminded him of the upcoming union between the Wang and Liu families. But while sticking close to George, she kept a close eye on how the Wang family treated him. She wasn't sure which mattered more, the blood-related heir, or the fake son they had raised for 18 years. The answer became clear fast. The Wangs didn't care for the real one, and the moment Willow realized that, she drew a sharp line and switched sides, pouring all her charm on Makoto. The two of them would stand outside the Grand Wang villa, smiling as they watched George being treated like dirt. To me, Willow is like mud on the bottom of a shoe, unpleasant and unlucky to step in. Maybe the chill in my eyes was too obvious. Because Willow shivered slightly, she tried to suppress her unease and forced a shaky smile. "George, how could you not like me? If you didn't, why would you save me like that? And the whole rooftop thing, you jumped because I was getting engaged, didn't you?" Mr. and Mrs. Wang, sniffling on the sidelines, quickly chimed in with teary voices. "Yes, George, once you're better, we'll change the will. You can marry Willow happily, okay?" That building was so high. How could you be so cruel to jump from it? Don't you know, every time I close my eyes, all I see is you falling from that rooftop. Mrs. Wang sobbed. "It's true, I've neglected you all these years." I stared coldly at this whole performance. Late affection, late romance. All of it was like stale bread, covered in moldy yellow fuzz, sickening to even look at. No matter how hungry I was, I wouldn't touch it. Expressionless, I closed my eyes, voice flat and emotionless. I issued my final order. "I'm not feeling well. Mr. Wang, Mrs. Wang, Miss Liu, please leave." Through the blanket, I heard muffled sobs from Mrs. Wang, and Alicia's soft, pleading words, trying to comfort me. In the end, all I caught was a whisper, uncertain and sorrowful. "George, I'm sorry." Chapter 17. The noisy crowd finally dispersed, and I once again looked around the hospital room. It was clearly a VIP ward. The windows were sealed tight, impossible to open. No wonder they left so confidently. It was already late into the night, and the once bustling city was now left with only streetlights casting dim patches of yellow. Curled up in the hospital bed, I rubbed my perpetually suffocated heart. Though it beat strongly, it always felt like something was missing. Nothing excited me anymore. Even the simplest tasks, getting up, washing my face, required countless pep talks before I could barely muster the will to move. It felt like an invisible hand had a tight grip on my chest, making it impossible to breathe. In my heart, I calculated how best to avoid those people so I could continue with my plan to fake my death and disappear from everyone's life. Suddenly, the door to the ward burst open. A slender figure appeared in front of me. She carried with her a chill in the air and immediately pressed a knife against my throat. With a dark expression, she said, "George, what kind of crap are you pulling again?" I stared at her, completely confused. I had no idea what she was talking about, but feeling the cold blade against my neck, a wave of joy surged through me. Perfect. Just when it felt like all hope was lost, here came a silver lining. Tonight, I could finally fulfill my dream of disappearing, escaping the curse of being the universally hated one. Let the next unlucky soul deal with this hellish storyline. My eyes shifted, and I suddenly lowered my head, aiming to slice my own neck. But in the next second, the coldness vanished. She had retracted the knife. I was speechless. She frowned. "What are you doing?" Annoyed, I snapped. "Just do it already. Kill me." She was clearly angered by my reaction. fuming. Shut up, I'm not here to play games with you. Tell me honestly, where did you take Makoto? After you ruined the engagement party, Makoto suddenly vanished. His phone was found smashed at the venue. Was it you? Did you secretly hire someone to kidnap him? You're the only one who's always had a problem with him. Who else would do it? George, what kind of nonsense did you feed everyone else to make them believe it wasn't you? That's when I finally snapped out of it. Kidnapping. Something that expensive, you think someone as hated and broke as me could pull that off? Just yesterday, I checked the original George's phone balance. A pitiful 20 yuan left. And to top it off, this morning, his streaming app auto-renewed its membership, 19 yuan gone. Now there's only 1 yuan left. I can't even afford a shady lymph node meat bun. Where would I get the money to hire kidnappers? Sure enough, this is the classic universally hated plot. Even while lying in a hospital bed, I still somehow get blamed for everything. I cleared my throat and looked at the woman in front of me, finally voicing the biggest question in my mind. Who are you? Chapter 18. The visitor's expression froze instantly. Under the glaring white light of the hospital room, I clearly saw the quake in her pupils. After a long pause, she replied stiffly. George, what trick are you pulling now? How could you not recognize me? Of course I didn't recognize her. There's a whole book's worth of names stored in my brain. How could I possibly match every new face with a name? I knew Alicia because she looked almost exactly like me, like a twin. I knew Willow because she was engaged to Makoto, and the Wang family had mentioned her countless times. But this woman who suddenly showed up out of nowhere. Who the hell knows who she is? I casually made up a flimsy excuse. I fell from the rooftop at the engagement party and hit my head. My memory's a mess. I've forgotten a lot of people. Just those few words made her reel back in disbelief. Her eyes instantly turning red. Her lips trembled as she asked, still refusing to believe it. You forgot me. I scratched my head and said, yeah, I forgot all the unimportant people, you included. I don't know if it was my imagination, but when I said the word unimportant, her body seemed to shudder slightly. She bit her lip and said, that's impossible. We grew up in the same orphanage. How could you forget me? She shook her head in pain, her eyes growing redder by the second. That's when it finally hit me. This woman was Sophia, Makoto's close confidant, also the childhood friend who had grown up with the original George in the same orphanage. Sophia was the same age as the original George. They'd clung to each other through thick and thin, surviving all the way to adulthood in that harsh environment. When George was finally recognized and taken back to the wealthy Wang family, Sophia had gone to visit him, sincerely happy for his change of fate. But then, she met Makoto, gentle, polite, refined. Love at first sight. 18 years of childhood friendship couldn't compare to a couple of sweet gestures from a wealthy heir. Sophia gave her heart entirely to Makoto, knowing she was beneath his status and unworthy of a formal relationship. She didn't even ask for a title, content just being the emotional confidant, so long as he lived well. When I read the original plot, I was always puzzled. Why would Sophia, who had shared such a long, tough past with the protagonist, fall hopelessly in love with Makoto after just a few meetings and begin to despise her old friend? But now, seeing her in person, it all made sense. The original George was like a wild weed, bristling with thorns, hardened by survival. In the orphanage where resources were scarce, he had to fight every day just to get a bite to eat or a chance to study. Meanwhile, delicate little Sophia had always hidden behind him, managing to stumble her way through high school thanks to his protection. Now that she was grown, no longer a helpless girl needing someone to shield her, the boy who had been her crutch for years was no longer enough to satisfy her growing material desires. Naturally, she cast him aside. Makoto, on the other hand, rich, romantic, everything she imagined in a Prince Charming, was the perfect match for her fantasies. And the original George? Reduced to a volatile, overly competitive pile of worthless mud in comparison. I gave her an irritated once-over and said, I already told you, I've forgotten all the people who don't matter. If I don't remember you, that just proves you were never essential to my life in the first place. Chapter 19. Sophia left the hospital in a daze. Unusually quiet, not even bringing up the kidnapping of Makoto again. Shortly after she left, I slipped out of the hospital unnoticed, breathing in the long-lost taste of fresh air. I wandered alone toward the large bridge near the hospital. Standing at its height and looking down, I saw the rushing river waters surging fiercely beneath me. I had survived in this alternate world for a month now. It was time to leave. Though it was a bit late for my fake death and vanish plan, I knew the original George probably wouldn't be waiting on the other side. Still, I smiled faintly, staring at the churning waters, just about to leap and disappear into the roaring current. But in the very next second, wham! I was struck hard from behind. Everything went dark as I collapsed to the ground, completely unconscious. Right before my consciousness faded completely, I couldn't help but mutter inwardly, damn, my life is tougher than a concrete pillar. When I groggily woke up again, the sound of crashing waves filled my ears. The salty sea breeze, thick with moisture, clung to my skin. Slowly opening my eyes, I realized I was lying on a jagged rock by the seaside, and standing above me with a smug expression was none other than Makoto. His face was twisted, completely devoid of the refined, gentlemanly charm he usually wore. The sky was beginning to lighten, a faint silver glow marking the approach of dawn. The sun was ready to rise. Makoto's hatred for me was written plainly in his eyes, his resentment sharp and unmistakable. He ground his teeth and spat. George, you disappeared for 18 years, why the hell did you come back now? Just to shake my place at the top? Now the entire Wang family is on your side. I even faked being kidnapped and planted evidence to frame you. But aside from Sophia, no one believed it. The more he spoke, the more furious he became. His identity as the male lead had crumbled rapidly ever since I arrived in this world. After a moment, Makoto calmed down. He leaned in close to my ear, grinning arrogantly. George, I'm going to show you something today. When things get dangerous, they will always choose me. I glanced at the group of vicious-looking thugs nearby, and the whole picture became clear. The Wang family's choice. Honestly, what did that have to do with me? I wasn't the original George. Ever since I arrived in this world, I never had any hopes for that family. Looking at the rising tide and the turbulent sea swelling with power, a wild, long-forgotten urge stirred in the depths of my desolate heart. Chapter 20. The Wang family arrived faster than I had expected. Makoto and I were being held on a jagged reef, with pitch-black sea water churning right behind us. One slip, and we'd be swallowed whole. Alicia, dark circles under her eyes, stood at a distance and shouted, "How much do you want? Just let them go." One of the kidnappers snapped impatiently. "Let both of them go. Then what the hell do I have to bargain with? You only get to choose one. When the money arrives, I'll release the other." Makoto put on a face of noble sacrifice and said, "Mom, Dad, don't worry about me, save Big Brother." Sophia's worried gaze flicked back and forth between me and Makoto. Finally, she hesitated and spoke. "George, you hired these men, didn't you? The tide's coming in. It's dangerous to stand there. Please, just come back. If you come back, I'll forgive you." I rolled my eyes. The kidnapper was clearly losing patience. He barked, "Choose now, or I'll toss both into the ocean." Mr. and Mrs. Wang were in a complete panic. Alicia hesitated for a long time before she finally said, with difficulty, "Let Makoto come over first. We'll gather the money right away. Just don't hurt George." No one objected. Even though every one of them wore expressions filled with reluctance and guilt, I understood exactly what they were thinking. They had invested so much in Makoto. Mr. and Mrs. Wang had poured 18 years of money, time, and energy into raising him to be their successor. Alicia had been his sister for 18 years. Sure, there were fights, but blood ties like that aren't easily severed. Willow knew I was her savior now, but she had grown up alongside Makoto for over a decade. Not all her feelings were fake. Of course she wasn't ready to let go of him completely. And Sophia, back in the orphanage, she'd always hidden behind me, taking and taking. People who grow used to receiving rarely give anything back. I, on the other hand, was the one they had abandoned from beginning to end. They had never spent a cent or a second of effort on me. The less you give, the easier it is to walk away. So when the crucial moment came, of course they didn't choose me. Makoto nodded in satisfaction. As he turned to leave, he couldn't resist tossing back a smug remark. "George, I told you, you'll never be able to beat me. To them, there will never be a place for you in their hearts." I raised an eyebrow and replied, "Is that so?" Chapter 21. The sun slowly rose, casting faint light across the sea, breaking into shards of golden brilliance on the waves. Makoto was already ashore. Alicia looked at me again, panic written all over her face, and shouted, "George, Mom and Dad are gathering the money now. We'll have the full 30 million in cash soon. Don't worry." Willow chimed in from beside her. "George, don't be afraid. I'll marry you. After this, I promise I'll cut ties with your brother." Yet somehow, my heart was strangely calm. I looked at them all with a stillness as deep as the sea. No emotion, no turbulence. I spoke flatly. "There's no need to waste the money." Everyone froze. Since I had taken over this life from the original George, I might as well say a few words on his behalf before leaving. I turned to the Wang parents and said, "Mr. and Mrs. Wang, come on, let's be real. Why spend that kind of money on an outsider? Let's just drop the act. We've never been close. Since we're strangers, there's no point pretending otherwise. I only lived with you for a year. You never liked having me around. And honestly, I found your entire family exhausting. In the year I stayed in your house, I never once bullied or framed Makoto. If you don't believe me, feel free to check the surveillance footage." Alicia's face turned deathly pale, as though she'd already guessed what was coming. Her eyes filled with dread. I looked over at Willow. Truth be told, I didn't have much of an impression of her. Even up until today, I hadn't clearly remembered what she looked like. I said, "Miss Lu, your shameless fence-sitting is honestly disgusting. Let's be blunt, you just go where the money is. If the Wang family heir were a dog, you'd still want to be Mrs. Wang, because that's all you really care about." Willow lowered her head in shame, covering her face with both hands, trembling in anguish. "One person left," I said. "As for you, Kim something, right? Doesn't matter. I don't remember you anyway. There's really nothing more to say." Sophia Kim had come far too late. Over a month had passed since I arrived in this world, and the so-called childhood friend of 18 years had only just appeared. Before this, she had been loyally staying by Makoto's side, nameless and unacknowledged, offering him comfort. And yet she never noticed that the George she claimed to care for was no longer the same person. Sophia's knees gave out, and she nearly collapsed to the ground, mumbling in disbelief. "No, that's impossible. George, you promised to protect me back in the orphanage. You said you'd always protect me. TCH. He'd have been better off protecting a stray dog." The tide was rising fast now, waves crashing into the cliffside and leaving deep trails of foam. And in the middle of everyone's panicked cries, I turned around and jumped. My thin body cut through the air like a falling star, plunging straight into the raging sea. The sun finally burst free of the horizon, flooding the endless ocean with golden light, as a rush of seawater flooded into my lungs. The fog in my mind suddenly cleared. Scenes from my life flashed before me, rapid and disjointed, like a spinning reel. From the orphanage, to the Wang family, to being cast out and left to survive on the streets. I finally understood why I'd had no friends, no family in the world I came from, because that world was never real. It was something I imagined in my deepest pain, and in a world that doesn't exist. Of course no one sees you. Of course no one cares. I felt like a wandering soul, drifting through the city, fantasizing about a lonely, uneventful life. The book in my mind never truly existed. Every word written in it was a reflection of my reality. Death shattered all my illusions. As the final gulp of seawater filled my lungs, I slowly closed my eyes. So this is it. From beginning to end, I was always George, the one everyone hated. Anna Extra Chapter 1. After working overtime for over a month straight, I stretched my sore shoulders with exhaustion. The partnership between the Wang and Lu families had officially dissolved. We had to start from scratch with a new supplier, a process that demanded constant fine-tuning. When I went to the Wang family's villa to retrieve the termination contract I had left behind, I once again saw the family in total chaos. Mrs. Wang, hair a mess and face twisted with rage, lunged at Mr. Wang. With a sharp slap, 5 bloody finger marks appeared on his face as she screamed hysterically, "Wang, you were just a live-in son-in-law when we got married, and yet you had the nerve to have a bastard with the maid. And then you had the audacity to switch that bastard with my own son, making me raise someone else's child for 19 years like a fool. I'm telling you, we will never be done with this." That's when it all came back to me. The rumors had already spread through our entire circle. A few months ago, George had jumped into the sea. His body was never found. The desperate Wang family had waited at the coast day after day, praying for a miracle, but no miracle came. What arrived instead was a flood of scandal. An anonymous paternity test was delivered to Mrs. Wang, black and white, clear as day. Makoto was Mr. Wang's biological son. Utterly devastated, Mrs. Wang investigated the events of 19 years ago and finally uncovered the truth. Mr. Wang had originally married into the family, a live-in son-in-law constantly under pressure and control. He ended up having an affair with a young maid, who accidentally got pregnant. She gave birth on the same day as Mrs. Wang. Crushed under the shame of being a kept man, Mr. Wang made a ruthless decision. He swapped the babies. From that moment on, his illegitimate son became the son raised by him and Mrs. Wang, Makoto, and the true biological son of Mrs. Wang, George, was abandoned and sent to an orphanage. Back in the chaotic Wang villa, Mrs. Wang was still thrashing about like a lunatic. She screamed, "Pablo Wang, you separated me from my son for 19 years. You heartless bastard, our Li family should never have let you in the door. All the shares I held in Wang Corporation, 40%, I've handed them to our competitors. Your pitiful little shareholding, useless now. You have no voice on the board. Ha! Even if it means mutual destruction, I won't let you have a peaceful life. George, my poor son, what sin did I commit in my past life to raise another woman's child and abandon my own flesh and blood?" With Mrs. Wang holding the company's lifeline in her 40% stake, transferring all her shares to the rival firm meant the end. Mr. Wang was ousted from the board that very day. And just like that, the mighty Wang empire collapsed overnight. As for Alicia, I looked toward her, sitting numbly beneath the eaves. Her face was streaked with tears, and deep shadows under her eyes showed she hadn't slept in days. In her hands, she clutched a faded old protective charm. I'd heard the story, she had picked it up casually, a cheap souvenir. On the day George returned to the Wang family, Alicia had handed the trinket to him, her biological little brother, as a gift. It was the only gift she ever gave him, a 20-yuan good luck charm. George wore it around his neck the entire time, treating it like a treasure, but somehow, it had ended up back in Alicia's hands, more worn out than ever. She was no longer the Wang family heiress, and that mansion. I turned around and saw the real estate broker and new buyers inspecting the villa. The Wang family was finished. Now they didn't even have time to worry about where to live. As for Makoto, last I heard, he was clinging to the Liu family now, but the Liu family had only ever survived by leeching off the Wang name. They were barely staying afloat themselves. There was no way they'd marry their daughter off to a fake heir. Anna Extra Chapter 2. The Liu family's downfall was even more absurd than the Wang's. And even so, Makoto still clung to Willow like a leech, refusing to let go. There was no place left for him in the Wang household. Even though Mr. Wang was technically his biological father, he was still a son-in-law who married into the family. For years, the Wang family's wealth and power had been firmly in Mrs. Wang's hands. Mr. Wang had always just been a figurehead. At a business banquet one evening, I happened to pass by a private room and caught a glimpse of Willow inside. She was no longer the dazzling beauty she once was. Now, she fawned and flirted awkwardly as she accompanied Mr. Liu in entertaining a sleazy small-time boss. That boss, clearly unimpressed, finally said in exasperation, "Chairman Liu, I'll give it to you straight. The Wang family's done. Su Corporation runs the game now. Everyone knows George once saved Su Group's heiress at a jewelry store. Now that the Su family has spoken, who dares give your company orders anymore?" He shook his head at Willow with a sigh. "Ah, if only your daughter had married George back then. I heard the guy was hopelessly in love with her." Willow stumbled out of the room in a daze. In the misty autumn rain outside, she got into a fierce argument with Makoto, who had come to pick her up. She screamed hysterically, "This is all your fault, you useless illegitimate bastard. If I had just married George, I wouldn't be in this pathetic situation now." But in the next second, smack, Makoto slapped her across the face. He shouted, furious, "You're already engaged to me, and you dare bring up George in front of me again. I'm telling you, you'll never get rid of me in this life." I remembered the last time I saw Makoto. He was still a refined, elegant young heir, but just a few months later, all that composure had vanished. What was left was nothing but a raving thug. Still, as crazy as he'd become, he had nothing on Sophia. Anna Extra Chapter 3. Sophia dropped out of college. When George had just reconnected with his biological family, he had beamed with excitement. "Sophia, my real parents are rich. Once I return to the Wang family, I'll borrow money from them to pay your tuition." Sadly, George only managed to cover her first year. Then, he vanished beneath the waves. Sophia, who had always been shielded by George, suddenly realized, without the men she constantly thought about, she couldn't even manage to stay in school. There was no one left to stand in front of her, no one to protect her from the storm. Beaten down by life, Sophia dropped out. She started working at nightclubs, taking whatever simple jobs she could find to cover her expenses. That mid-autumn festival, I visited the cemetery where George had a cenotaph. From afar, I saw Sophia kneeling before it. She was weeping uncontrollably, slapping her own face again and again. Sobbing, she reached out and caressed the black and white photo on the gravestone. She choked out, "George, I was wrong. Please come see me, just once, even in a dream. Now I understand, in a world without shelter, you have to fight and claw for even the tiniest bit of survival. George, don't forget me. I beg you, don't forget me. We've known each other the longest. Why were you the one who forgot me in the end? You remembered Alicia, you remembered Willow. Why did you forget me?" Her sobs were unbearable. I could only feel disgust. Right, they'd known each other for 18 years. So how could Sophia toss George aside so easily, just to fall for Makoto? I rubbed my temples. After seeing all this twisted mess, I really think I need a therapist to help me heal my poor, traumatized soul. Anna Extra Chapter 4. The psychologist I had booked sat across from me, finishing a cup of tea in one smooth motion. He was young, surprisingly so, yet already gaining a name as an up-and-coming star in the field. I stirred my coffee, steam curling upward, and asked, "Mr. Dawn, not a fan of coffee?" He shook his head. "My childhood wasn't exactly pleasant. I never got used to the taste. Also, I skipped class to be here today, so if you've got questions, Ms. Sue, ask them quick." Who would have thought? This rising psychologist was just a sophomore in college. I stared into his eyes, curious, and asked, "I've seen too many dramas lately. And some things just don't make sense to me. Like, who sent that anonymous paternity test to Mrs. Wang? And how did that person know Makoto was actually Mr. Wang's biological son? Mr. Don poured himself another cup of tea, then smiled. That's not too hard. Generally speaking, when parents find out the child they raised isn't biologically theirs, fathers tend to be more eager to make a switch. Most dads don't want to raise another man's kid. You can even see it in the comments under those baby swap news stories. Many moms say, if I raised the child myself, I couldn't possibly give them up, while the dads usually say, even if it hurts, we have to switch them back. In short, when it comes to emotional investment, fathers tend to cut their losses faster. So if Mr. Wang was more resistant to welcoming his actual son back than Mrs. Wang was, well, it probably means there was something not normal about his bond with the son he raised. I nodded slightly, then I asked. But I still don't get it, why did the biological son have to jump into the sea in the end? Wouldn't it have been better just to reveal the truth and walk away? He chuckled. If the mystery had been revealed calmly, without pain or loss, the Wang family would likely have remained intact, but only if. Only if the biological son was gone. Would Mrs. Wang be hit by enough guilt and grief to go nuclear, to drag Mr. Wang down with her and destroy the entire family empire? And let's be honest, a family like that, not worth going back to. I nodded again and took a sip of coffee, then I asked. So, that day at the jewelry store, did the biological son really risk himself to save me? Or was he just trying to gain the title of lifesaver, hoping I'd help him fake his death later in that storm? He clearly froze for a second. After a moment, he lowered his head with a sheepish smile and said, half true, half not. That son, he only recognized that the woman at the jewelry store was the Su family's heiress, so he gave it his all to win a shot at a new future. Luckily for him, it worked. I pinched his arm hard. George, if that knife had missed by just a bit more, you would have died. He responded seriously. I know, but I was careful, every single time. Life is precious. Death is not the solution. Dying is just the weak man's revenge. It never triggers regret in the strong. I never believed they'd truly feel remorse after my death. I only knew one thing. If anyone was going to save me, it would be me. I stepped forward and hugged him. George's new life was going well. He was studying psychology at a university far, far away from the Wang family. The shadow that once loomed over him had completely lifted. That peaceful smile he wore was one born of countless days and nights, spent clawing his way out of the darkness. I said softly, your new name suits you. A serene smile spread across George's lips. He said, I am Dawn, born from breaking through the clouds.